Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to another episode of MA Latino News Opinion Plus. This is a space for our opinions where we talk about current events and questions the Latino community is curious about. My name is Belen Dumont, reporter for Massachusetts Latino News. Today we are joined by Leon Smith, Executive Director of Citizens for Juvenile Justice. Welcome, Leon. Thank you for joining us this week.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited. I was wondering if you could first start off, tell us a bit about your organization and what's inspired you to join.
Absolutely. So Citizens for Juvenile Justice, we were founded in 1994 as the only independent statewide nonprofit organization working to reform and reimagine the juvenile justice and other youth serving systems in Massachusetts. We were founded by juvenile justice professionals, lawyers, mental health professionals, people working for youth serving providers who were fighting for and working with young people on an individual case-by-case basis, but they acknowledged that there was a need for an entity to really bring that same fight to the system level, to push back on laws and policies that led to more harm for young people in the communities that they live in. So CFJJ was born out of their vision. And so we're an independent research, advocacy, and policy organization. And again, we really focus not only on young people in the juvenile justice system, but young people who are at risk of being pushed into pipelines like the school to prison pipeline or a child welfare to prison pipeline, trying to dismantle those systems while also making sure the young people who are actually in the system are treated fairly and equitably.
Right. I appreciate that explanation. It sounds like you guys really look at it through a broader level. And we'll absolutely need to have you come again and explain some of these things because they're just such ongoing phenomenons. So I was hoping to specifically talk about last fall, your organization helped with a report on racial disparities within the state's juvenile justice system. I was wondering if you had any key findings that you'd like to share from that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Massachusetts Office of the Child Advocate released a report titled Racial and Ethnic Disparities at the Front Door of Massachusetts Juvenile Justice System. And it really focused on the overrepresentation of both Black and Latino youth at the front point or the entry point of the juvenile justice system. So what data found was that Black youth were 4 times more likely than their white peers, and Latino youth more than 3 times more likely to experience a custodial arrest. So although the summons is the preferred mode for effectively charging a young person and sending their case to court, a custodial arrest, and just keep in mind, when a case comes before a court for an arraignment, it's one vision when someone walks into court with their parent. It's another when they're brought before the court already in handcuffs. Subconsciously, it definitely creates a whole different impression on the court, on the judge, which can impact the overall outcomes. What was found is that even when there are similar types of offenses, a Black or brown youth is more likely to be arrested, thereby receiving a harsher outcome at the very beginning of the system.
And I think one of the things that the report said was what helps determine whether or not what kind of arrest occurs, it's based off of the perspective of the officer, right? It's sort of something that we can't measure.
Yeah, so it's interesting, when you begin to talk about offenses, often people's minds go to very serious offenses, but let's look at misdemeanor offenses. Less serious offenses, generally, they have a lower likelihood of resulting in an arrest. And officers have much more discretion in whether or not to make an arrest or issue a summons in those cases. What the research found, that even in misdemeanor cases where there's more discretion with the officer, Latino youth were brought to court via custodial arrest 32% of the time, Black youth 28% of the time, and white youth only 18% of the time for those misdemeanor offenses. So when the case type shows that there's more discretion, that discretion manifests in racial disparities that negatively impact Black and brown youth.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for saying that. It was very beautifully explained. I was wondering then, what are some steps that Massachusetts can possibly take in the near future to address these disparities in your expertise and opinion?
Absolutely. So these are cases that are disproportionately pushing children of color into the court system. And often we know from research when young people hit formal court processing, it doesn't have a deterrent effect. It actually makes it more likely the young person will continue to move through the system. One of the things we can do is continue to expand diversion. So diversion is a young person has made a mistake or they've committed an offense, and we want that young person to both get some help and not continue on a path of repeating that type of behavior. Diversion says we are going to take this case, we are going to direct it to community-based solutions. They can be restorative justice, they can be requirements to do community service, they can be treatment, counseling, different ways to address the needs of young people outside of a formal court system where you've got a prosecutor, you have an attorney, in and out of court, back and forth, which really delays a young person getting help. By sending that case to diversion, often you can get a young person involved in services much more quickly. You can address the issue. You can still hold a young person accountable, but do so without giving them a court record or just sending them into the court process. And ultimately, that brings about better outcomes.
Gotcha. I fortunately have had the experience of being able to speak to juvenile advocates, juvenile justice advocates in Rhode Island, and they were
Mhm.
emphasizing the importance of listening to youth voices in that reform. And one of the things they emphasized was those sort of formal court hearings. It's really intimidating for these kids, and they don't really get to have discussions and feel like their voice is heard. But as you're saying, diversions, is that a better opportunity for them to explain their side of the story or sort of learn in a better way?
Absolutely. So it's interesting because I started my career as a juvenile court public defender in Rhode Island before coming back to Massachusetts and doing that work for many years. And just to give folks a picture, you go to court, you arrive, you sit in a hallway, your parents missing a day out of work, you're missing a day out of school, you may wait for hours. And for some of those initial hearings, you're in and out of the court in 5 minutes and 10 minutes. And then you have to come back, another missed day of school, another missed day of work for your parent. And you're sort of just cycling through this system. And, once the formal process starts, you enter a not delinquent plea, which is the juvenile equivalent of a not guilty plea. And it's a court process. The juvenile court is not a service provider. Now, contrast that with a diversion system where you go to a diversion program, they do an intake where they can talk to a young person, they can talk to a parent, they can get a sense of everything that's going on and come up with a plan or come up with some supports and services that address the underlying causes of the behavior. I mean, the shift really has to happen. We have to move away from just thinking we can just punish and deter, because research shows that that doesn't work. But understand that often when young people get to this point of crossing that line, there's things going on, there's trauma, there's underlying issues that if you address those issues, that if you give young people counseling, that if you open the door for young people to take alternative paths, you address what led them to that issue, you resolve that, and then young folks are often able to go forward and just do much better.
I appreciate that explanation. Thank you. I was wondering, in what ways does your organization help engage with local young people in Massachusetts?
Absolutely. So CFJJ, our strength is in our community engagement and our coalition building. So yes, we are an advocacy organization. We release research. We advocate at the State House and also in municipal matters. But that advocacy is shaped and driven by our partnerships with our advocacy partners and folks who are part of our coalition. So we really make a concerted effort to reach out to people in impacted communities all across the Commonwealth, within the four corners of the Commonwealth. Our physical office may be in Boston, but our reach endeavors to reach, all across Massachusetts to make sure we're hearing the voices of young people, parents, and folks in impacted communities about what the most serious issues are, but also what the solutions to those are. So when we may be the face going to the State House saying, we think this piece of legislation should be passed, but that legislation was shaped by stories and experiences and the input of people who are living Black and brown people often who are living the experience in our communities.
Right. That transitions perfectly to my next topic, which is really, I was wondering what your legislative priorities are for the organization going into this new year. What kind of bills you guys are focused on?
Absolutely. So we're really, really, really excited. We have a very robust agenda of legislation that's coming up. So I want to highlight we have a bill to raise the age. So raise the age. It looks at young people just transitioning into adulthood, 18 to 20 years old, many of which who are still in high school. When young people hit the adult criminal justice system, they have the highest recidivism rate, which is a sign that the approach isn't working. Because if young people continue to loop in and out of the system and in trouble, that is a product of the adult system not being geared to meet the needs of young people in that age frame. We are proposing, as Vermont has already done, and as other states are currently proposing, to move 18-year-olds and then in future years, 19 and 20-year-olds into the juvenile system where they have meaningful family engagement, where they have more opportunities to complete their high school education and move to training or post-secondary education, where there's counseling and therapy that is really focused on their age group. When you look at young people who are committed in the juvenile system to age 21, it's a 22% recidivism rate. When young people 18 to 20 are in the adult system, it's 76%. So really, that's like one of the more transformative proposals. But we have others as well. We want to continue to expand juvenile diversion, as I mentioned. We want to expand opportunities for expungement so young people who've moved on from their mistakes can better clear their record. And then another I'll mention, we're also looking at policing practices as well. We want to make sure that young people who are being interrogated by police officers have an attorney present, because young people are significantly more likely to falsely confess. But also we want to follow the lead of California and other states in saying law enforcement officers should not be able to use deceit when questioning a young person. So if you've ever seen a movie where an officer comes in and tells a young person, well, your friend in the other room, he already said you did it. And then a young person then goes and confesses when that's not in fact true. Those practices are linked with false confessions, particularly for young people, and we want to outlaw those in Massachusetts. So there's many more. If you go to cfjj.org/take action, you can see a full legislative slate, 14 pieces of legislation related to juvenile and criminal justice, 5 to the school to prison pipeline. But that's just a quick overview.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like you have a lot on your plate. So absolutely excited to provide more information on that and follow up on them as well.
Thank you.
So
Yes, no, it's part of going across the state and getting all this tremendous input generates so many tremendous ideas, which is why we have such a robust agenda.
Right. It really is a product of collaboration, it seems like, and learning from each other's sort of progress, right? This is a national issue, so it's great that we can learn from each other and work together on it.
Absolutely. I mean, partnership and really just a spirit of partnership and collaboration is really what's key. We see what's happening in our communities. We want to make it better. We don't just want to reform around the edges, but we want real meaningful and transformative change that makes a better Massachusetts for our young people of color. And that's really where our legislation is aimed.
We're running out of time. So if you have any last reminders or resources you'd like to, did you get it all out?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would encourage everyone to please consider following us and following our work. You can find us on your social media sites, Twitter and Instagram at CFJJMA, on Facebook at Citizens for Juvenile Justice, LinkedIn Citizens for Juvenile Justice, or you can go to our website, cfjj.org, where you're able to access our advocacy efforts, our research, and as well as sign up for our newsletter where you can keep track of all of the work that we're doing.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Leon. It was a pleasure having you be our guest, and I look forward to speaking with you and following up on all this work.
Thank you so much for having me. I greatly appreciate it.
Of course. Everyone, please join us next time on MA Latino News Opinion Plus. This is a space for opinions where we talk about current events and questions the Latino community is curious about. For more information on our discussion today, please check out our web story on malatinonews.com and follow us on Twitter at MALatinoNews. I'm Belen Dumont with MA Latino News Opinion Plus, and I will see you all next time.